Hey guys, welcome to From the Witch's Garden. My name is Peggy and I am trying to grow a cut flower garden here on my allotment in Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan. Thanks for checking out my channel. Okay, so the sun is actually shining right now and it's lovely, but the temperatures have dropped this week, so the garden's pretty much done. Everything is starting to die back. The only things I still have to do are cut back all of this gomfrina, which I am going to cut back and then dry. And I'm going to do the same for just the few last bits of amaranth that I have as well. I'm going to cut them back and dry them. But as the rest of the garden has pretty much gone, I thought we could run through what I'm planning to do next year and where everything's going to be going, what I'm going to be putting in. My last zinnia. Oh, these guys are looking pretty sad. My amaranth too is all looking pretty sad and it's starting to fall down. And my dahlia have stopped budding completely. Here you can see that this dahlia is starting to die back by itself, even though we haven't had a proper frost, but not all of them are. These ones are still kind of green and leafy. I mean, that was a bud that was coming, but I don't think it's actually gonna turn into a flower. I think the temperatures are too cold now that they're not actually going to flower, but I am going to leave them in the ground a little bit more and just let them die back naturally by themselves. You know, they're starting to go kind of brown and crunchy, so I'm going to leave those in a little bit more and just let the tubers get nice and fat and juicy for next year. Okay, so what am I actually planning for next year? Well, I have my little chart here. So I have once again drawn out the allotment and put down all of the plants that I want to grow and the spacings for each one. Now there's a few things that I learned last year, and I will do the top 5 things that I learned last year in a next later video. There are things that I've learned last year that I'm going to apply this year. Some of them are pretty simple, like I don't need weed cloth down, which is great. It means I don't have to worry about having multiple spacings in a very close area. Secondly, my lanes, the dividing little walkways that I had down here, they were really, really small. They were really, really narrow. And towards the end of the season, when I had my amaranth being huge, and next to that I had my zinnia, and then the bigger things like the gomfrina started to spread out more. It was quite hard to get through them when I had the sunflower as well. Some of them were quite hard to get to, but it wasn't difficult enough for me to widen them this year and sacrifice flower growing land. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with my super skinny rows and just deal with it like I did last year, because it was annoying, but it wasn't a major issue. So I'm going to stick with my super skinny rows. And that leaves me with, like last year, 3 rows 80 centimeters wide and 1 row 70 centimeters wide, because the allotment's a bit squiggly. And in the 70 centimeter wide row, it's actually 50 at one end and 70 at the other. Kind of goes squint. So that's what I've done here. Now there are going to be a few adjustments to this plan because I got the same plot back. Yay, plot 17 is still mine. But that means that some of the stuff that I put in last year, I'm actually going to leave. For example, like this Daucus dara. So none of my Daucus dara came up and flowered for me this year, but this one seems to still be going. And you know, it's putting out new shoots down at the bottom there. It's starting to fluff up again. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to survive. I'm in zone 9, between zone 9A and 9B, so we have a pretty mild winter, so I'm just going to leave that in the ground where it is and see if anything actually comes up this year. Did you wake up? Do you want to come off the bicycle? Did you do waking up? Yeah. Also my poppy, these are the California poppy that I put in, and I think I just put them in too late and they didn't do anything. I think I had 1 or 2 come up and the flowers fell straight away. But these guys are really bushing up now and getting taller and growing, so I'm going to leave them in there. Now this is where I'm supposed to be putting my stock, but I have quite a lot of stock going in the garden, so I think I'll do 2 plantings of the stock. I'll put 1 in initially and just leave these here, and then if I get any flowers from these, I'll wait for them to stop flowering and then put in some stock that I'll have started on at home. But yeah, I'm going to see if any of those actually come this year because they're looking pretty healthy and good. Okay, so this is the first row. If you're working front to back, this is the first row of my allotment. And last year I had all of my sunflower in here and they did really, really well. But I learned that I kind of messed up a little last year because of where the sun comes. And it meant that when my sunflower came up, which they did very quickly and were massive, it completely shaded out the next row of things that I had planted. So I now know not to put tall things here, to keep the tall things back there. And so this year, this is going to be all my short plants. Now I've gone through all of my plants and basically organise them in height order so that they're going to go from small to tall. Now that seems like common sense, but yeah, I didn't do that last year. So I'm going to have all of my shorter plants here. So with the exception of my dahlia, I'm going to dig my dahlia up from here and put them in that back corner. The reason I'm doing that is because the dahlia take a little bit of time to get height on them, at least they did this year. So I'm thinking that by the time these are getting big and tall, the stock that I have in there will be starting to finish. The temperature changes really quickly here around Golden Week, which is kind of April, May time. So I'm thinking that my stock will be starting to finish as the strong heat comes on, and that's when the dahlia are really going to put height on and come, so it shouldn't be so much of an issue there. So I've got my dahlia, I've got these ones that I had in the garden this year, which I'm going to try again because I didn't get what I feel was a good amount of flowers off of them, but I've also ordered some of the some new dahlia, which are some bigger kind of dinner plate, more showy dahlia as well for this year. So they're all going to go up in the back corner. I have put them at the same spacing as I had these ones this year, so it's about a 30 centimetre spacing that I've put them at. I might find that if they grow better than they did this year, that might be a bit tight, but these ones seem to do fine at that. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3 dahlia in per row, and I'm going to have 3 rows of them, so 9 dahlia plants in total. After that, I'm going to have my calendula. Now, I didn't really like the calendula that I had this year. Well, they didn't come on very well, but the ones that did come on were very, very sticky, and I didn't realise that. And I've since been told by one of my followers, thank you. Oh, thank you. You're bringing me sticks from the baby. That they are actually a medicinal plant, and it's that stickiness that they use for that. But it just meant that they weren't a particularly nice flower I felt for cutting and having in the house for a cut flower. So I'm not putting very many of those in this year. I'm going to grow a few more, a different variety, just to see if I like them any better. But I'm not putting in very much of that. Then I have some phlox in after that, which I'm quite excited about for a nice filler. Then I've got some gypsophilia, which I didn't kill when I potted them on the other week, which is great. They're growing quite well. Then I'm going to put in some crimson clover, some statice, and some Mexican paintbrush. So these are all kind of small filler plants that don't grow very tall. Most of them are about 30 to 50 centimetres high, with the exception of the dahlia. So that's going to go in this first row. So it's going to be a bit of a mix, but mostly my fillers. Okay, so row 2 is where I had my dahlia this year, and then everything else pretty much didn't grow because they were shaded out by the sunflower. So I've already said that I'm leaving the California poppies at the end to see if anything comes from them. But basically this entire row is going to be a block of stock. I've got 4 different varieties of stock. So I'm going to have a block of stock, then a block of Chinese aster, which I really want to do better this year. They didn't work this year because they got shaded out by my gypsophilia. Are you seeing a trend here of me planting things too close and in the wrong place? Yeah, my aster this year all got shaded out, so they didn't do well at all. And so I'm giving them a lot more space and a bigger block all to themselves, so there's literally nothing to shade them out. So I'm going to have a block of stock, a block of Chinese aster, and then a big block of rudbeckia. And I am putting the rudbeckia in to replace my sunflower. If you watch my video about sunflower, I did a recap of all the sunflower that I grew. They grew really nicely, and they were really tall, and they were really strong, and they all looked quite nice, but I just didn't like them as a cut flower. They had so much pollen drop. They didn't smell particularly nicely. They didn't dry particularly nicely. So I don't really want to do sunflower again. So instead of that, I'm going for the same colours and another big flower and something that will still look quite autumnal, but I'm hoping will just be a little bit nicer as a cut flower. So I've got 2 different kinds of rudbeckia in here. I think I've got a Sahara mix and I've got the caramel mix. So I'm quite excited about them to see if I like them any better. Okay, row 3. So after my sunflower stopped producing, basically all of my other flowers this year came from row 3. This was my star row. Obviously it had masses of gomphrena. This stuff, I mean, it's a filler. You could have a big bunch of it. I think it's quite nice. But it just keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps coming, and it fills out. It's a really big bushy plant. Think about that when you plant it, because it did shade out, I think, 3 other rows that I'd planted behind this just because it bushed out so much. I didn't realise that was going to happen. But in this row is where I had my gypsophilia, I had my verbena, I had my zinnia, and I had my cosmos. So this was basically all of the plants that actually gave me flowers this year. As much as I love this stuff, I'm doing this to learn what grows well in my area, so I don't want to be growing a lot of the same thing again unless it's a different variety. So I'm not actually putting this back in the garden, even though it did really, really well. Instead, this row is going to be my zinnia, and I have lots of different types of zinnia. I didn't like my peaches and cream zinnia this year, but I did like the big lime ones that I had. So I've got a few different types this year to see which ones of them grow well and which ones I really like. If you watch my last video, you'll know that they aren't actually the zinnia I was planning on having in the garden because the Japanese customs took away my seeds. So I've had to kind of adapt the plan a little. Oh, baby climbing over a tripod. You come here. What are you up to? Hi. Hey. I had to adapt my plan a little to suit the seeds that I could get in Japan instead of having to have them sent to me. So slightly different zinnia, but still lots of different varieties in there. So this is going to be all of my zinnia, all of my cosmos, and then some cornflower at the end. With my cosmos, I felt like at the end of season, once I thinned them out, I got nice cosmos, but other than that, they didn't do well. So last year I had 3 per row, and this year I'm going to cut that back and only have 2. So I'm going to have 2 rows of 2 for each variety of cosmos that I have, and I have 3 different varieties. So they're going to have a little bit more space just to see if that helps them do a bit better. So yeah, this row, zinnia, cosmos, and cornflower. Okay, and that brings us to the final row of the allotment. Now, this is where I have obviously my amaranth, and in front of that I had some ami that did okay, but not great. But this was supposed to be my filler lane last year, if you like, and it just didn't work. I had some achillea, a mixed berry one, I had achillea cloth of gold, I had some ponytails, I had some bunny tails, and I had my Daucus dara. I think that might have been everything. And it just didn't work. I was way too late in the season starting it. A lot of it got washed away in the rainy season. The seeds are so small that yeah, a lot of them got blown away in the rainy season, and a lot of them got eaten by mystery something that seemed to be eating the roots, and I still don't really know what that was. So none of that really worked. Now, like I said, I've got 1 Daucus dara still there that I'm going to leave in and see what happens. Also, I found this little guy hiding under the gomfrina. I found this guy who is a bunny tail. Now, if you watched way back in my videos, you'll know that I sent my husband down to weed the garden one day, and he chopped down all of my grasses thinking that they were weeds, and so I'd kind of picked it up and tried to replant it to see if anything would happen, and nothing did, so I assumed they were dead. But it seems that this one is looking pretty strong and healthy, so I'm going to leave him in there as well. And see if anything comes of that over winter. Maybe he'll grow a bit more once I cut back all of my gomfrina. Okay, so yeah, didn't have much success in this lane last year, and I now know that this is where I need to put my tallest things in the garden. So this year my tallest things in this half of the lane is going to be snapdragon. So I'm going to put all my snaps. And that's going to be almost half of this area is going to be my different types of snapdragon. I didn't have any luck with my spike flowers last year, so I'm really concentrating on them with the snapdragon and the stalk, just to see if I can get some of them growing here. These are both ones that like colder weather, and they stop flowering as soon as the temperature ramps up a bit, and like I say, the temperature changes really quickly here, so this is a bit of an experiment to see if I can actually get them to grow here and how long I can get them to last into the season before they just get killed off by the heat. So this is going to be snapdragon. Then I had planned to put in a couple of different types of amaranth again because it grew so well this year, but just try a few different types. And then the rest of this was going to be an ornamental mixed grass. But again, those seeds have been confiscated and destroyed, and I couldn't find anything similar there. So I've had to have a bit of a recce and figure out what I can put in here instead to fix that. First of all, though, once I get this ami out, I'm going to go ahead and plant my sweet pea in here. This is where the sweet pea are going to go, and I'm going to grow 2 lines of the sweet peas that'll kind of take up half of this row. Then once my sweet pea dies back, I am going to replant that with one of the amaranth. I still have my amaranth coral fountain, so I'm going to put in some of that amaranth. And then I've got some Chinese lanterns and some minirobata. Still don't really know what that is. That's going to go in there once the sweet pea have finished. Then I've got the other things that I kind of grabbed off the really good website I found, TakiNet. But it's stuff that I've never really heard of, I haven't really seen, so I don't know how it's going to go. We've got some ramosa, some Dede Sukasu, I've got my drumstick scabious going in here, I've got my Chinese forget-me-nots, and I've got some orange dwarf something. So these are all plants that I'm really not familiar with. And let's see if they grow and give me anything that is similar to grasses to kind of fill out any arrangements that I want to do. Now, that's the plan. That's everything that I've got to go in. I've got my seeds already in my seed box. I have, let me get my seeds. I have organised all my seeds out, so I've banded them together. So these are all ones that I have started already. These are planted up in the garden and in my little seed pod, and they're all growing on already. And then I have organised them by when I need to plant them. So these are January seeds, February seeds, and I've got one for March. So that I don't forget when I'm supposed to put these all in. So this is how I organise myself to make sure that I know how many I need to be putting in. I've got everything marked out, all my different spacings, I'm holding that upside down, all my different spacings so that I know exactly how many of each plant I need to fill up this space. Now, I always plant extra because last year I had a lot that didn't germinate. I had a lot that I put into the garden, like say a lot of them got eaten by mystery bug. So I always plant up a few more just in case anything fails so that I can replace it out quite quickly. Also, when I was looking at what I was going to replace the ornamental grasses with, like I say, they're plants that I'm not familiar with, but I chose plants that were drought tolerant, basically. It got very, very hot here very, very quickly, and it's hard. There's no water on my allotment. I have to bring it down in big barrels, which is a lot of hard work. What? So I've gone for things that I can start at home and then plant into the garden once they're a little bit stronger and a little bit bigger. Hopefully get them in so that they're growing through the rainy season, but they already have roots on them, and then they're coming into flower just as the heat hits so that they get the best chance of actually producing something before they get scorched to death in the Tokyo heat. So yeah, that's it. Let's see what grows. I'm excited that I'm on the same plot. So my next job is, like I say, to cut down all of my amaranth, and I'm going to put my sweet pea in pretty soon and clear out my gomphrena and dry it. And then I have to start preparing my soil. Now I am going to try and improve the soil a little bit. I feel like the soil has been a bit neglected over the years. But I'm reluctant to pull everything out too soon because it's much better to have living roots in your soil. It feeds the soil, it feeds the all the little bugs in there, all the bacteria in there, good bacteria in there. It helps aerate your soil, it helps get moisture into your soil. And when I got this plot last year, it was quite compacted. It was a lot clayer than I thought, and it had been baked solid. So I think it really needs all the help it can get to break it up down there, get more air in and get more water in. So all of the surrounding allotments look very beautiful. Everyone's tilled their soil and they're all ready to put stuff in, but I am going to let mine stay a bit weedy just a little bit longer to try and help the soil out. Yeah, hopefully. I'm not just lazy, there's a reason I'm leaving all the weeds in, honest. So yeah, here's my plan. Let's see what grows. Thanks for following along with me. If you want to see if this works and how the garden looks, then remember to hit the subscribe button below, and I will see you guys next week. Bye! Squirrel, say bye! Bye! Good girl.